Youngstown, Ohio. My name is Dr. April Torrence, and I thank you for allowing me this time to spend with you at least the next hour on some of the things that I have experienced and I would say the last 25, 26 years in both direct and indirect experience. So if you are familiar with the food industry, you know that it's typically food and beverage. So my indirect experience is in the food industry, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. My direct experience is in the beverage industry. No, I don't have a degree in hotel or hospitality management, nor do I ever want to step into that realm because that's not my call. But it is certainly the call of many people. And so, by way of introduction, I have spent the last 26 years of my life in the arena of childcare and early childhood education. Part of that management requires me to comply with the regulations that are set by the United States Department of Agriculture as we manage the guidelines associated with myplate.gov. And of course, you know, anytime you're feeding children, especially in a school setting, you know, there are specific components that have to be made and met. So that is my direct experience in the food industry. However, I have been blessed to mentor many people over the years who were starting out their business in the food industry. So 1995 is when I began working with USDA. So I'm familiar with those regulations, and I do have a slide on that later on. In 2002, my mother decided to leave my childcare facility where she was doing all the cooking, and she launched and created and started her own diner. At the time, she was in her late 50s, but she finally was able to live the dream. And behold, we had Reggie's Diner. Reggie's Diner without a business plan, Reggie's Diner without vendors, Reggie's Diner without equipment and furniture. Like, we were starting from scratch. And so I found myself helping my mom on a day-to-day basis, not in the kitchen. Again, that's not my call whatsoever. However, the management part of that food industry was big, and it was the very thing that made her dream very short-lived as well. So when I go through the slides here, I'll make reference to that as we go along. I will say that the diner is still open in Farrell, but it's not Reggie's Diner. She was able to pass over all of her equipment and supplies to another business in the area who took it to the next level, and they're still in session. And I'm sorry, not in session, we're in session. They're still in business, and that happens to be Triple D's Diner. So that's what happened in 2002. And then in 2021, my son, who had trained underneath my mother, was finally able to launch his personal chef business called The Five. And he has a really nice clientele. He prepares his meals in a commercial kitchen. We pick up there. We have our ready meals for the week. So again, this is by introduction, by way of introduction. I have more information to share with you along those lines. So as we move to the inspiration page, I just want to add also in 2019, I'll be talking a lot about the beverage industry that we launched, my daughter and I, along with my husband, which is NIU, N-I-U, the Hawaiian word for coconut. We're going to talk about that shortly, but that is my direct experience that I made mention of. So at the end of the day, you know, we're always talking about, you know, how to get started, but why? You know, why would one want to get started in the food and beverage industry? The question is, what is your inspiration? Are you doing it because you watch your grandmother do it, like my son and another young lady that I'm mentoring, and you just sort of want to carry the torch and take it to the next level. I mean, if that's your inspiration, great. Or maybe you've always felt this call, to work as a chef, and you went to culinary school and you're ready to get started. And this has been your dream all your life. That's your inspiration. And so you went and you got the credentials behind it. Or hey, wait, maybe you saw a Rachel Ray show, right? And you saw her passion in the kitchen and you thought, you know what, that's what I want to do. I want to be like Rachel. Or hey, WKBN, Mr. Food. I grew up with Mr. Food. Ooh, it's so good. And I'm sure there are many people who watched him cook every day, that short clip, and they decided, this is what I want to do. I am inspired to start my own business, a new business in the food and or beverage industry. So identify your inspiration and grow your brand. So on this particular slide, I figured, okay, if this is going to be a food and beverage presentation, why not share a recipe, right? I almost put a recipe on every slide, but I thought that would be a huge distraction. This one happens to be mango and poke salad. So when you decide, whoever sees this, if you go back and look at it, here's a recipe that I'm sharing with you, and you are welcome to make it. I will not be the one in the kitchen making it, but I will be happy to try it. So moving right along, as I said at the beginning, starting a new business in whatever industry, you are going to need a business plan. And you've probably heard this a million times over. It is your recipe to success. There are components. Not only is it your recipe to success, but this is typically what banks look at. If you are interested in applying for a loan to get started because you don't have the funding to get started, or you don't have the supporters or contributors or investors, there's a better word, you may have to borrow money. It happens. It happens. So if so, they're going to ask you for a business plan. And there are the components here. This is not a business plan class. So I am not going to go over all of the components in detail, but I will identify them while we have them before us. Executive summary, that's the big picture of who you are, why you're doing what you want to do, and the success behind it. Hopefully there is some success, if not the inspiration. But it will tell the big picture. It's your opening statement, and it should grab the attention of those who are reading it. You want your mission. What are you all about here? The background of the company. If you're just getting started, that could be as simple as the 600 sweet potato pies that you made in your kitchen and sold throughout the community, or it could simply be the brew you were making in the barn outside, right? The apple cider or something. Like, there is a background, there's a history. What are your humble beginnings? Don't be afraid to share that, because that's your strategy. This is where you were, this is where you are now, this is where you want to be. So share that background. The description of your product, then there's a marketing plan. I believe there's a SCORE video out there about marketing your business, so make sure you check those out. And then there's a big one right down there at the 6 o'clock location on that circle, your competitors. Like, you have to know your competitors, right? If you're going to sell the best burgers in town, you better be prepared to present some information on why your burgers are better than McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Five Guys and all the ones who are all the big organizations and businesses and companies that are already like killing it in the burger industry. So know your competitors. The SWOT analysis, I do have a slide coming up about that independently, so we'll get to that. But the last three components there: operations, how you're going to handle your business; financial planning, I do have a budget slide coming up; and a timeline. Moving forward, when you are dealing with any industry, just about, but in this context, your food industry, there's always going to be regulations at the local, state, and federal levels. I always say start local. it may take a moment before the feds knock on your door because you're out of compliance, but at least talk to your local code enforcement officer and see what's required to get started. You'd be surprised how many people have this big inspiration that, oh my God, I'm going to do Mexican food from my house. It's Taco Day. It's Taco Tuesday. And we're on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. There's TikTok videos. Buy the tacos at my house. Okay. Give your address out. And you don't have a food service license or a vendor license to do absolutely one taco, let alone feed the whole community. So start at your local level. Make sure that you are doing what's necessary and required to stay legal and not get shut down or end up with a huge fine. In addition to that, there are always going to be some guidelines at your state level. Your county will have a USDA that is governed by the state of Ohio, state of Pennsylvania, wherever you're watching from. Contact them. Contact the USDA in your area. And I have that on there as a reminder of, the phone call that we received, and I think maybe 2016, maybe 2015, 2016, when my daughter was making all of her tropical drinks in the kitchen, and we were taking it down. We were taking these drinks down to the community fairs, and all the things that we were having in our local community. And it ended up on a front page, and the newspaper gave her front page coverage, and it just shared all over social media. Lo and behold, I received that phone call, the phone call that says, hey, are you doing this in a commercial kitchen? If not, did you do an application with the USDA to come in and inspect your kitchen to make sure that it is okay to do this? And I thought, oh my God, we need to do something. And so, no, I didn't have them come into my house. No, we didn't drive to Youngstown, Ohio to the commercial kitchen. We sent her to a local business incubator, and we started our process of formulating her drinks and having it produced in a manufacturer plant. And they handle all that in New Jersey. So I heard someone say a long time ago, like, if you start out right and you stay right, you'll end up right. So start out on the right foot. Contact your local code officer, go to the city building and see what's required of you. Next slide. This is from personal experience here. This is definitely a beverage slide, right? There's just a different process, and there's different regulations for different things. We happen to do a hot filled tropical drink. That means it has shelf life. It does not have to be stored in a refrigerator. The whole process is completely different. Whereas I have a friend and another mentor who has a beverage brand, and they did cold filled, and their product had to be cold filled, and they ended up putting a lot of money into meeting those requirements. And then they ended up having to reformulate because they were finding that they couldn't get cooler space in stores, and the product had to be kept cold. So why is this on here? I'm glad you asked that question. So here's the answer. No matter what you're going to do in the food and beverage industry, make sure you start out right. Make sure you identify what your product is going to be, right? If you're just making cupcakes, that's room temperature storage. You don't need a cooler for that, right? Unless you got cream cheese icing. But if you're doing potato salad and you're selling potato salad to everybody in the community, that is legally, and you're also selling potato salad to maybe a couple mom and pop restaurants, that those things have to be labeled. They have to be approved. That's the word I'm looking for, by your local USDA office or whoever comes in and does the regulation. So personally, we have a hot fill beverage, and we just did production Friday and Monday. Those samples have gone out to be micro tested. So I can't even pick them up from the warehouse until the test results come back. This is not something you just, jump in with 2 feet and say, it's Taco Tuesday. I'm feeding everybody $2 a taco. If you know better, you do better. So I'm providing you this information so you don't get that phone call or the knock on the door like we received in 2016. So next slide is certification. This is big. This is big. So take a look at that. It says serve safe. Some of you should be familiar with that. If you're already working in a restaurant setting, 9 times out of 10, this is on the wall somewhere. The cook has already gone through their certification process. I know my staff at Zion Education Center who work in food and nutrition, they have their Serve Safe certification. Some of them have gone even further and did some certifications in child nutrition practices and got their CMPs. But listen, if it's Taco Tuesday and you receive the approval from the city, right? People want to know. They want to know, have you got any sort of training? Like, do you have 3 sinks, one to rinse your dishes, wash your dishes, dry your dishes? Like, there's a process in all of this. So make sure you go and you take these online courses. Some of them are free. They're not expensive at all. I think it was maybe like $175 for the Serve Safe certification. It's worth paying the price. The price to get your credentials is sometimes a lot less expensive than the price you have to pay if you've been fined because you are serving the general public without approval, without authority, and without certification. But this is one of my favorite slides here. This is all about your team. So it's, again, I'm going to build the story, right? It's Taco Tuesday. Now you have your Serve Safe. Now you have your vendor's license. You haven't been able to open up a building yet, but maybe you're in a food truck now. Who in the world is helping you, right? You got a team of people. You're not doing all this by yourself. Certainly, you're not the one collecting the money and still handling the food. I hope not. That's it. That's a huge no-no. No touching cash and then touching food. No, that's a no-no. Nevertheless, I like this slide because I always say your team should look like or represent your clients or your customers, right? If you have customers from all walks of life, at least have a diverse team so that when people are patronizing you, they see that you are supporting other ethnicities, other races, other cultures, other socioeconomical groups in your community, and giving back to your community. Like, you're giving people a job, you're helping, building economic development. So I'm throwing diversity in there now because we're on team. I do understand sometimes when you're just getting started, it's a family-owned business. Some families are very diverse. I have a very diverse family. I have sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws from all different countries, England and Japan and Liberia, South Africa, from Italy. Like, I have a very diverse family. So if they're helping me with the NIU, with the beverage business, right? You're going to see a diverse team. They may not know it's my family, but the representation is there. Always take consideration to reflecting that your team reflects the customers and the clients that you serve. Now, this, in starting, this new business here, I'm sharing my label on here, my personal label for our beverage drink. I just happen to have pancakes here on the side. If you haven't eaten, you're probably hungry by now, but nevertheless, that right there says a lot, right? We talked about hot food, cold food, room temperature, what have you. Those things have to be documented on your label. So in this retrospect, most of the time, if we're buying pancakes, they're frozen, right? Frozen pancakes in the freezer. The information is on it, how to store it once you buy it, and then how to prepare it. It comes with instructions. So when you find yourself in the industry, if you're not serving like hot food on demand, if you're gone beyond the Taco Tuesday truck and you're doing something else that requires packaging, you have to have a label. I think this is fairly important because if you only knew how many labels we created over the years doing NEU before we got this one right here, this little pretty one for tropical berry, you'd laugh. Uh, all kind of labels that when we put it in the cooler, the ink would run off, and then the ice cubes would be pink. And it was just awful. It was really bad. But there are professionals out there that will assist you with making labels. You provide them with the information, they will provide you with the labels. As you could see on my label here, on the right, there is a nutrition panel. And that nutrition panel is actually supplied to me by the lab who does our drinks. They have a chemist there. He does all the chemistry. Everything is provided for us. All I need to do is turn that into the person that's making the label. Of course, at the bottom, and I think I have another slide on this, but you see our barcode, right? That's not something we just made up. It was a whole process. I believe it's gs1.org. G is in George, S is in Sam, .org. They provide all the barcodes or the UPC codes that you have to put on your packages. So putting just a generic label on is, it's cute, right? When you're getting started. But as you expand your product, your food, your beverage to the general population, you want to get it as professional as possible. As you can see on the bottom, I have in little white letters, food allergies, because there are so many food allergies out there now. Of course, like peanuts and things like that being very common. I have our label coded at the very bottom in bold letters there. It says contains tree nuts because it's formulated with coconut water. So we have identified that on the label, and that prevents us from being sued by someone who consumes our product and they have some sort of reaction to nuts, and it was a coconut. So let's talk about profit and loss for a moment. So let's go back to an analogy with Taco Tuesday. Okay, so it's Taco Tuesday. The truck's booming. You got customers lined all the way down the block. Your license, everything's in place. Everything's perfect. You're taking in money. You got your team, some taking money, some making tacos, some packaging tacos. And all of this is going to cost money, but you don't track it. We have problems, right? How are you going to know if you made a profit or if it was a loss for you? Someone needs to be in place, and hopefully not you, unless you're licensed, like you're licensed CPA, or you're a bookkeeper part-time that works for a CPA that knows how to manipulate systems like QuickBooks, that whole Intuit software, Peachtree, some of those other nice software products. But I say this, it is important for you to know how much revenue you took in, how much revenue you spent. How much money you spent before you even started making money today. What were your expenses? How much money did you spend on food, supplies, packaging? And then how much did you promise to pay your team members who are working for you today? Right now, the restaurant industry is paying double digits per hour. You know, that's new. So if you're getting ready to start a new food business, this might be time to lean and depend on your family, because these new recruits now are requiring like 12, 13, 14, 15 an hour as part of your expenses. Payroll is part of your expenses. Now, the problem is if your expenses have exceeded the amount of money that you made at the taco truck, you definitely have a loss. Yeah, right. We want the exact opposite. We would like to see you maybe spend $300 on expenses and another maybe $400 on, paying family members a stipend. And that's what we're at 700, right? Let's say you made $1,000. So there you are. You have a $300 profit. Now there are other fees that are associated, but it's just a basic profit and loss. And I could talk this until I'm blue in the face, but at the end of the day, it is so important for you to connect with like a part-time bookkeeper that can help you track your expenses and your revenue so that you can actually see this on paper and analyze what you've done after it's all said and done, how well you've done, and hopefully not how poor you've done. Again, you cannot not afford to pay a professional to look at your numbers. It'll cost you in the long run if you don't. This is one of the things that my mother did not have in place before she closed her diner. And before we knew it, she's passed away some years now, 10 years now, but she had gone through her entire retirement plan trying to fund and sustain her restaurant. But you don't want that to happen to you. Trust me, you don't. All right, I believe that slide said pricing, and I don't know what happened to it, but I will, before I talk about pest control, let's just talk about pricing for a minute. Pricing to me is very important. And I said at the beginning that I was able to mentor people in the food industry. And then directly, I'm in the beverage industry, but I have another friend, very dear friend that I was mentoring. She made the best chocolate, right? She wasn't at the level of like Daffins or Philadelphia, but she was just getting started maybe 12 years or so ago. She did really good, great candy displays for kids' parties. Like it's just wonderful, wonderful displays, great work, even had chocolate for diabetics. And she was just basically pricing things because she thought that would be a very good price. And before you knew it, she was spending more money on chocolate than she was getting in from her customers. And so I asked her, I said, well, how much are you spending in supplies? And she says, well, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, if you don't know how much you're spending on supplies, how can you set the price for your chocolate? Like, you just can't sell chocolate for $3 just because you think that's what people can afford. That doesn't work that way. So in order to make sure that you are not operating at a loss and that you are making some profit, definitely set your pricing to, of course, to a rate where people can afford, but also at a rate where you are actually making some sort of profit. So I do apologize that that is not on that slide. I'm not sure what happened, but so let's move from money. Let's move from money and then look at this. This slide right here says pest control. And you may think that I'm talking about pest control, right? Bugs and roaches and mice, things like that that happen in a food or beverage industry, but I'm really not. The reason why I'm not is because that would have been taken care of at the local level, right? Your local food inspector, the code officer, he would have came in, he would have looked at all of that before he even gave you permission to sell to the general public. What we're talking about here, pest control, is like that next step after SWOT, your SWOT analysis. But your pest control are the things that could potentially negatively affect your business. Things that are of politics, like politically, economically, social economically, and technology, like all of these things come under risk management. And if they are not addressed at the very beginning, like a risk management plan, it could cause much harm while you're trying to maintain and sustain your business. So, know what's going on politically. If the laws change concerning the food and beverage industry, it may be for your good or it may be for your bad. How many billions of dollars was just given out to restaurant owners from the SBA? I think it was, I don't want to guess, but the SVG grant or something of that nature. But nevertheless, it was specifically for the food and beverage industry. They were able to sustain their businesses, get the grants that they needed. So politically, that helped risk management, that helped manage the survival and the longevity of that particular restaurant, especially in this pandemic society that we're operating in. Economically, we've already talked about that, right? You knowing your profits, knowing your losses, knowing your community around you, if they can afford your prices, that's important. And then there are other indicators like social economical issues. How many restaurants had to shut down during civil unrest and protests? You gotta stay on top of things, right? It could affect you at any given time. And then lastly, technology is always going to be big in this particular field because there are some restaurants that have a point, I think it's called a point of service. You put your order in, they just punch it in, it goes right back to the line cook. You may not be able to afford that right off the bat, but as soon as you open your door, someone's going to be knocking on your door trying to sell you something that you may not be able to afford at this given point in time. One of my favorite restaurants here locally, soul food restaurant. Good Lord, I think I spent almost $1,500 a year there. Shh, don't tell anybody. But they're no longer a brick and mortar, just they couldn't afford it. They started out with a lot of high tech stuff and it looked good, but they couldn't sustain the pricing and the contracts associated with those things. Everyone can't afford a credit card machine. They can't afford the fees. You do what you do at the beginning, you manage those risks, and hopefully as you grow within your timeline, you can enhance the very things that you need. So again, I had shown you the SWOT analysis when we looked at the business plan slide, and this is one of those other factors that is often talked about in your business plan or your business degree program. Your SWOT analysis is always going to look at your strength, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats. That PEST analysis that I had just shown you, that's going to fall under the threat column. But your strength, that's going to come up like in your executive history. I'm sorry, your executive summary, and maybe the history of the business that you're trying to build. You got to show where you're strong at. And then as far as weaknesses, these are some things that you may not have yet, but you have control over it. And eventually you'll get there and you'll overcome on what it is that you're trying to achieve. It may cause some harm or you may lose some revenue until that happens, but capitalize on your strength and then work on those weaknesses. I said the threats, but again, those are things you typically don't have control over. You don't have control over what the government is going to do, what society is going to do. You just plan around that. Opportunities would have been like that big grant that I had mentioned. Like these are things that would help your business grow. And you do have control over it. You have to capitalize them while you have access to those opportunities. And I only have a couple more slides here. Of course, the Q&A and the thank you, but I am going to stop sharing my screen at this point in time because it's 6:40 and I know that I am supposed to have time here or allow time for people to ask questions. So before I continue on, are there any thoughts or questions or comments? I'm not sure, Georgianne, how would you handle that? You may have to unmute so that I could hear you. I'm sorry. Georgianne or Sam? I just saw my attendees. Can you unmute? Okay. Well, if there are no questions and comments, no, I've been talking for 40 minutes now. I can sort of summarize some things that I just presented. One is, I think it's very important, if I could just reiterate, that if you start out right and you stay right, you'll end up right, no matter what the industry is. In terms of this food and beverage industry, you want to make sure that you start out at the local level and talk to your local code office, talk to the health department in your city to see what is required for you to start your business and make sure that you have everything that you need without getting some sort of fine or, okay, Sam, thank you. Some sort of fine. You don't want that. So we want to start out right. If you guys can put something in the chat box, I'll try to answer that way. In the meantime, I'll continue to go on. Um, don't make the mistake that my mother made of getting started on her dream and not having that business plan in place, and being taken advantage of by vendors that was selling her things that she wasn't ready for ahead of time, going through her retirement plan, trying to sustain a company. Like, you want to avoid those pitfalls along the way. When I think about others who are doing what they can do from their home, I would say, if you're starting out, find the commercial kitchen in your area if you are manufacturing products, to make sure that you are creating and cooking in a area or in a kitchen that's already governed by the USDA and also the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. That's huge. But avoid the government knocking on your door by all means necessary. I'll also sum up by saying, get a CPA on your team. If you can't afford a CPA, hire a bookkeeper, contract with a bookkeeper who can help you out for under $200 a month. Make sure you get that done. Okay, you want to make sure that you can look at your profits and hopefully not look at your losses. You want to analyze your expenses. You want to see what's costing you more than what you should really be paying. You want to consider, again, your team. Does your team look like the customers and client base that you serve? Can they identify with the people? And God forbid, please, if you do involve your family, make sure that they are customer friendly, right? Like, sure, dad can help, sure, Johnny can help, sure, cousin Eddie can help. But if they have a bad attitude and no customer service skills, how about if they don't come to work today just because they didn't feel like it, and they know you're not going to say anything because you're the big cousin? That's not the type of team members I'm talking about. Not at all. Don't shoot yourself in the foot trying to reach out to family. But I know at this point I'm getting a little humorous and silly, but I'm just trying to make up for time because I don't have questions here. So I talked about family, talked about the CPA, and I'll conclude with this. We are in the process of expanding our tropical drink business, NEU, into some of the major retailers. We've been reaching out. Our target market has been like individual customers for the last 3 years. Finally, we're going for the big retailers. And they asked me, what's our market? What's our target market? Know your target market. I know that we're trying to reach like health conscious consumers who don't want all the sugary drinks. We are trying to reach parents who want like a low sugar product for their children. And we're trying to reach people who are struggling with diabetes, who need a low sugar. Like that's my target market. If you are launching a new product in the food industry, make sure you have identified who's going to buy this food. That's big. That's going to be in your business plan as well. But know your target market. Know the population that you're going to serve. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this presentation at 6:45. You can reach me personally if you have any questions about anything that I have presented today via email. My business email is NIU, NIU, by BY, Talls, TALLS, @gmail.com. I had to think about that. NIU by Talls @gmail.com. Talls happens to be the acronym for our corporation. If for some reason you'd like to look up more information about my for-profit and nonprofit companies, you can find information for NIU at niubytalls.com. You may look up information about about Zion Education Center, our early childhood education program, at zioneducationcenter.org, ZION educationcenter.org. Other than that, that's all I have for you today. And thank you for your time and attention. And once this video is available to you and you have viewed it, please let me know again if you have a need, and I'll do my best to help. Thank you.